worked out since this was back in 2000 or 2000.
Yeah, August
Yeah.
2000.
Yes, I love that. And oh, I did have a question. I mean, I agree that Wally should have walked her down the aisle, but what happened to Bryant? Did he just not want to be there? Just out of curiosity?
Yeah. Lynn, you want to field that question?
Well, at that point, he was sick. His heart was pretty bad. And frankly, I didn't want him there. So I just told him that we were doing a low-key wedding and, he could come if he wanted. And he was like, well, I don't know. I'm sick. And I was like, don't worry about it. You don't need to come. So he chose not to. And I preferred Wally to walk me down the aisle anyway. So
Perfect.
I can give you more context when we get into my stuff later.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. That's it? Anybody?
Yes, that was it.
Thank you. That's very. I even got a little bit emotional as you were going through the chapters 37 through 40 there. So anyways, I'm just glad that for the most part, the first draft is done. It got sent off to 2 editors, one for content, one for line editing, and they promised to get it back by March 10th. And then the beta readers also are reading it. I have, I think, 6 or 7 beta readers, and they're going to get their feedback also by
good.
10th. But I agree with your comment, Wing, about building out that relationship and how that developed between Drake and Claire, because as I was getting towards the end, obviously I was rushing, right? And so it wasn't as meaty as the first, 80% of the manuscript. But also, I just didn't know. It's something that Lynn and I didn't talk about how their relationship developed online as they were chatting. So, she and I are actually going to meet next week in Santa Fe as a breather trip, really, because this, as you know, has been, 3 years in the making to get this book to where it is now. And so we're going to pop some champagne and celebrate. But yes, I think when we talk a little bit more, you can, Lynn, share with me a little bit about how that relationship developed, and then I can build it out a little bit more. But anyways, thank you, Lynn, for joining us today. I know that when we first started this last year to get the critique team together and go over the Copper Phoenix, Lynn was really interested in meeting you all and wanting to just say thank you. And I'm just going to let her do all the talking now and hand the Zoom over to you, Lynn.
So I don't know if you all are aware, and please don't be upset, but Amy sent me links to all of the critique sessions. So I actually listened to each of your critique sessions. And Rita, I still recall you talked about how I was probably very dirty and probably very embarrassed about it. But my father was,
and
until the day he died.
To when you were in the
when we were on the road,
a lot
and driving, my dad would take me into restrooms on any pit stop and get a bucket and bathe me because he was a total neat freak.
Wow.
And I think that came from he had spent some time in the military. And for my whole life, we were poor, but we didn't have to be slobs, right? Was the message.
Mm.
Just because we were poor didn't mean our home didn't need to be presentable and clean, period. Right? And to your comment about my mom, I was way more disappointed about how sick she was than my father, than you can imagine. And I realized in that 5 months, and Amy didn't go into it, but it was pretty gnarly that 5 months I lived with her. I realized, even at that age, that I had to go back to my dad after the end of that 5 months and say, you did it the wrong way. But given the time period in 1971 when fathers never got custody of their kids, it's like you did the wrong thing. You did the right thing. You just went about it the wrong way by taking me, right? And as bad as my father was, he was immoral, very immoral, but he knew what he was doing was wrong. And so he could feel shame. And I know this because I made him feel shame a number of times. Like, for example, when my stepmother came and asked me to talk to him about not bringing other women into the bedroom, right? When I had that talk with him, he was very ashamed. And you could see it for the first time. I mean, you could see it all over his face, right? And he was I don't know if he was ashamed that his daughter, 13-year-old daughter, was talking to him about this, or if he was ashamed of his actions. I'm not sure exactly, because it's not like he would freely discuss it with me, but you could see the shame. My mother, on the other hand, was amoral. Grew up in a very extremely sexually abusive household, believed that 9-year-olds who sat on their uncles' or brothers' laps, were, if he got turned on, it was her fault, even though she was like 9, right? Like, my aunt came home and caught her husband raping the 13-year-old and blamed her.
Yeah.
And the whole family went along with it, right? Including my mother, who supported the aunt. And I mean, when I was there, she asked me one time to come into the bedroom, and she had all these sexy lingerie outfits on the bed. It was like, I said, "What is this?" And she's like, "Well, I want you to go work at the strip club with your sister-in-law. You could make us a lot of money." And I was like, "Excuse me?" Like, to my mind, what mother on earth asked their 18-year-old daughter to be a stripper?
Right.
And then on top of that, she says, "Well, you don't have to fuck them until you're ready." So she was ready to whore me out too, for money. So instantly I was horrified by my mother, absolutely horrified by her. And at that point, completely understood why my father took me from her. I later learned many, 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 many things about her. In fact, that she got all her kids addicted to drugs and started feeding them drugs when they were like 6 and 7. To getting them to, sell pot to their schoolmates in middle school, right? When I lived there for that 5 months, she let my 13-year-old brother, I recall a situation where I came home one afternoon and my brother and a friend of his were double teaming a girl in his bedroom. He was 13, right? And my mom knew. She didn't care, as long as he brought her pot home later that evening.
Gotcha.
Right? So my mother I just couldn't abide her in any sense of the fact, she didn't have my interest at heart. She had her interest at heart. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, she missed me because she lost something. But then when she found me, it was, "Well, I don't like you. You're too much like your dad." And I guess, because I had been in recovery for a couple of years, and because thankfully Wally saved my life, I could see her for exactly what she was. And she and I were never on good terms. In fact, so in the book, what Amy doesn't mention is I was married before I met David. I got married at 19, but I knew that I probably couldn't have kids because doctors had already told me from both the Mayo Clinic and in Chicago and in LA that I would probably never be able to have kids. Even though I kept having miscarriage after miscarriage. But one of the things I have to be completely honest about this with a partner. So before we got married, I told him, I said, "Listen, I don't know if I can have kids, but I want them. We're really young. I don't want to do it now. Let's wait until we have a really great foundation. Let's wait 5 years and then we'll rediscuss, and maybe we'll be ready for children at that point." Because at that point I would be like, 24, 25. At the end of that term, he basically, I went to him and I said, "I'm ready to start having children now." And he was like, "I thought you would get over it. Like, I don't want kids ever. That's why I married you, because you can't have them." So and I was furious with him, but I was like, "Okay, fine. Then we have to get a divorce." And he was like, "Why?" And I said, "Because if I stay, I'm going to end up hating you. And at that point, it won't even be your fault. It'll be mine, because I know this about you now and I've chosen to stay." I said, "And I can't do that to you or me either. We're not compatible with our lifelong goals. Even if I never have a child, I want one. So in the end, if I can't have one, I'll adopt, right? Or, some other method, whatever." And so we divorced. And then I met David. But I gave David the same information up front. I'm incredibly, well, Amy knows me. I'm very honest and very forthright all the time. Not brutally so. I don't hurt people because I know what it is to be hurt. But I definitely say what I feel, but also try to be considerate of others. So in a relationship, going any relationship, I knew that I had to be honest. And yes, our marriage worked out. We've been together now for almost 26 years. We have two kids. They're both in college. One is 20 and he graduates this year with a degree in psychology in a BS. And then he is going to work in his field and then go into PhD, get his PhD in psychology. He and I are incredibly close, incredibly close. The youngest is 17, actually just turned 18 last week, and he's started college this year. So he's computer programming and electrical engineering. He's kind of following in dad's footsteps, whereas although I worked in the legal profession for 25 years, psychology has always been obviously a big part of my life because I've had to utilize it to understand this world that I grew up in, to understand these people, to gain acceptance. I'm not a big forgiveness person. I'm more about accepting that people did what they did, right? I don't believe in forgiving people who have no real true remorse or repentance. They say the point is for you, but to me, all I need to do is accept it and move on. Accept that they are who they are. Doesn't mean I carry the anger forward with me, but however, with as many things that happened to me as in the book, and Amy had to leave out a lot, guys.
There's a lot.
Through all of that, including my own faults, including where I, when I was acting out, I had to admit that I was held for my father for a couple of years because I was in pain. I was angry with him. I deliberately lashed out at him a lot, called him a fucking loser. Yeah, and I did, right? And I got in trouble for it, and I didn't care. When he was like, you have to, you're not being honorable, and you're not,
Why did you choose to leave that out?
What's that?
Why did you choose to leave that out?
Leave what out? My rebellion?
Yeah.
I think, Amy and I talked some about my rebellion.
So listen, this book already is over 110,000 words at where it's
Amy
at.
had a hard time condensing all of my issues and all of the stuff that had happened into, the size of book she wanted to make.
But if the beta reader reads it and feels like there's some holes, some questions that they need answered, then that might be something that we revisit, right? But
and the other thing too,
it flows smoothly.
Definitely too, ladies. I've also got the book and I'm editing and I'm going to fill in a few little gaps here and there, right? And so Rita, you're right. I think it's important to mention that I was very rebellious. And by very rebellious, I didn't like deliberately hurt my dad, but I refused to listen to it. He grounded me. And so I wanted to go spend a day with my friend, and I'd lie to him and tell him I was babysitting so I could spend time with my friend. And I was 13, right? Rebellion is normal. And given what I'd already gone through, I think it would be outrageous to think I wouldn't rebel in some ways or another. To me, those were very normal childhood rebellions. Like, you get in trouble, you get grounded. You don't want to be grounded. You want to see your buddy because you're not going to see her for like 2 weeks or whatever. And so you lie. You tell your parents. First of all, we're all Gen X kids, right? For the most part, I think. We were very latchkey kids anyway. And that was not untrue in my family either. I would come home from school and be expected to clean the house and take care of everything before Dad got home, right? And have dinner cooking. And I rebelled at that. I rebelled at the parentification. I didn't like having to be in charge of look, I love my siblings, don't get me wrong, but I didn't want to be the one that has to raise them, to change their diapers, to watch them more than their own parents did. And with Goldie, what's her name in the book?
Gisela. Yes.
It really,
Goldie.
yeah, during that time and from like 8 to the time she left him, I was responsible for running his household.
Yeah.
She didn't do shit, man. And when I say she didn't do shit, she didn't do laundry. She did what she wanted to do when she wanted to do it. Otherwise, she didn't do anything. So she would not take care of the girls. To the point that when they left, the girls called me mom. And they were only 1.5 and 3. Right? They called me mama. And twice she beat me over it. Right? they're my kids. And I'm like, well, if you'd take care of them, if I wasn't the one getting them up, getting dressed, feeding them, like giving them baths, singing them to sleep. They slept in I had to share a room with them. Right. I'm like, if I wasn't doing everything for them, they wouldn't call me mom, This is on you, chick, not me. And it's funny, Rita, you at one point you mentioned that I had to have internalized, because all children do, that there was something wrong with me, or that I had done something wrong. And the funny part about that is, I don't know if it's my IQ. I don't know if it's just the way I was born, but I never did. I never did. I knew. I mean, Goldie flat out told me, look, I don't want to raise some other bitch's kid. Right? And she told me that when I was 6. So I knew it wasn't me. Right? And I'm like, yeah, but you married my dad with 2 kids and you expect him to take care of your kids. So you don't want to raise some other bitch's kids, but you want to raise him to raise some other asshole's kids, right? Like, and even at 6, I knew that was not okay. It was just not right. I had a lot of access to television. I watched shows, and I knew my family was abnormal. I knew the moving was abnormal. Amy couldn't put it into the book, but you guys, I went to 24 different elementary schools in 12 different states. Okay. By 18, I'd been to 49 of the 50 states.
Wow.
Yeah. No, I think by 18, I'd been to 48. I went to Hawaii when I was 21. The only state I haven't been to is Alaska. But them moving all the time, that's not normal. I'd go to school every day, every new school, and no, that wasn't normal, because none of the other kids were doing that. Right? What I couldn't figure out was why my dad was moving all the time, other than that he was a fuck up and a drunk. Right? And he was a binge drinker, not an everyday drinker. So he'd go, this is the hard part. I have very mixed feelings. I love my father and I hate my father, and he has passed. So there's no way to I don't think even if he was alive still now that we would have fixed anything any more than we had. But I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. I knew he was sick. I knew that bringing home new women to your bed, I knew, with your wife, was not normal. Now, I didn't get a lot of details on it when I was young, and that's good, because I tried to stay out of his sex life. It was, frankly, kids don't want to know that stuff, and I'm no different than any other kid, right? It's just it was thrown in my face, and I was asked to, in a couple occasions, get involved, right? Not in the conversation my stepmom had with me, asking me to go to him and talk to him, because I was the only one he listened to. And frankly, at the end of his life, I was the only woman he would listen to. I mean, he told this girl he was having heart problems. He was in the hospital. I'd go visit him, and he wouldn't listen to anybody except me. And I think in the end, I'm probably the only woman in his life that he actually respected when he died.
Oh.
When I was 18, I was involved with a guy briefly who was just like my dad. So he was just he was like my father. And my father pulled me aside and he said, you need to get away from this man. And I said, why? I love him. And he was like, no, I need you. I took you from your mom for a reason. I need you to end up with a good guy. You cannot end up with someone like me.
Wow.
So he knew that he was fucked up.
Yeah.
And he wanted better for me, which was why he took me.
Mm.
And in the end, as abusive as my dad was, he wanted the best for me, but he didn't have any of the tools and didn't have any of the drive to fix himself to get the tools to parent right. My mother, on the other hand, was perfectly fine. I mean, my mother was a pedophile, which I find horrifying. She made Mary Kay Letourneau look like a Sunday school teacher.
Yeah.
In the book, Mark talks about my younger brother's father, about how he was in jail or something like that. And I was like, no, Amy, I'm going to change that, because it's important to note how sick my mother was. And what you need to know is that he was 16 and his parents found out about the relationship and they made him move away. And my mother was in her 50s.
Mm.
When I went to live with her, I found out she had seduced one of Mark's schoolmates who was 13.
Oh, geez.
So that's why I mean, the drugs, the immoral, and she didn't feel like anything she did was wrong. She sexualized her kids. She got my oldest brother, and I've been talking to him recently, really trying to get him to understand he likes older women. And the reason he liked older women is because when he was born, and now he's 20 years older than me, you know, when he was 13, he had some of her girlfriends who were in their late 30s seduce him. And so as a teenager, he grew up with constant sex from these older women that mom would throw at him and ask them to teach him kind of the way of the world. To this day, he likes older women, and his wife is like 15, 20 years older than him. And his world was so much that and the drugs and all of the other stuff that he didn't see what she did as wrong. Not only wrong, but illegal as hell. Right?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, well, there's nothing wrong. I said, yeah, but she tried to do that to the girls too. And let me tell you, none of the daughters accepted it. None of the daughters went, okay, I'll have sex with this man because he's going to help you financially. Like, all the daughters went, no effing way. And so my mother was estranged from all but one of her daughters for the last 15 years of her life. Right? All the girls cut her off, except for Kathy. And Kathy didn't cut her off, but she also was very distant, right? Lived thousands of miles apart. Mom couldn't afford to see her. She never made an effort to go see mom, that kind of thing, right? Like, they would talk on the phone, but that was kind of the extent of it.
And Kathy's Katie in the book, and she's the one that, right?
She's the one that went to laundry with me and told me that I had been abducted. And when I was 15, I was like, excuse me? Right? And then so Mitchell, my oldest brother, came in and was, you know, Kathy was like, hey, Mitch, you have to, you know, tell Connie. My real first name is Connie. I go by my middle name, which is Lynn. My mother picked Connie. My father picked Lynn. So I went with Lynn. And Mitchell, I mean, he gave me that whole description of that scene. He told me the whole thing, how dad locked them in the bedroom, how he kicked her head through a wall. They had to call an ambulance. But after I was taken, my mother was declared an unfit mother by the state. They took all of her kids and they put them in foster homes. They went to the three girls' father and said, here, you have to take the kids. He had remarried. His new wife didn't want him, want the girls. So he sent them back to her. Mm. At least my father took me and stood up for me. He did not want me. And those girls effed up like you would not believe. Right. My youngest brother, the same, totally effed up, begged me when I lived there for that 5 months, begged me to get him out of there. He's like, Mom keeps coming after my friends. I'm afraid she's going to come after me. Please take me away. Please take me away. Because on his birth certificate, legally, my father was listed as his father. So he has the same last name as I do, even though his father was a 16-year-old boy. And I tried. I actually tried. There were other things that happened there. I tried, and I became my mother's family's black sheep because my 13-year-old cousin came over one morning just shattered. She was in tears. She was shaking. And I was like, what on earth is wrong? Are you okay? You know, I held her, got her calmed down. And she was like, Dad or Mom's boyfriend climbed in bed with me last night and started feeling me up. She said, I managed to get away and I went in the bathroom and I locked myself in the bathroom. And I was like, okay, we're going to have to deal with this. We're going to have to call, you know, the authorities. We're going to have to talk to your mom so that she can get you in a safe space. You're going to need counseling, right? And my mom came home and, you know, I told my mom and she's like, look, I didn't know about the fact that her husband had raped her older daughter, who, by the way, cut off ties with her and had nothing to do with her after that. At that point, I didn't know that. My mom's like, you're not going to get a reaction out of your aunt. You think you will. She's going to blame Janelle. I said, she can't possibly blame her. She's 13 years old. This man climbed in bed with her in the living room. She was on a mattress on the floor in the living room, right? Like, how on earth could she blame an innocent virginal 13-year-old. Like, this is ridiculous. And he claimed that he thought it was the mother, and he climbed in bed with the mother, which is absolute bullshit. First of all, the size difference, the coloring. Oh, I don't know. Your bedroom versus the living room. All bullshit. Easy bullshit. But my aunt sided with her boyfriend.
It's pretty common, actually.
It is. But I wouldn't have it. And I was outraged, and I wanted to go to the authorities. I did get Jeanette into counseling. Jeanette, not Janelle. I did get Jeanette into counseling for a while. But eventually she, in that family, gave in and was like, well, I guess he thought I was mom and he didn't mean it. And it crushed me. I couldn't live with that, man. I couldn't. I have an incredibly strong morality. I have an incredibly strong drive not to hurt children or women, because my dad was a wife abuser. And I did end up in, being emergency put in women's shelters a couple times as a kid. And I have visceral, like, rage to this day, kind of reactions when I see that happening to people. And since I couldn't help, and my mother's whole side of the family was going to diss me for it, I was like, you people are too sick to be around, and I cut them all off. It's like, y'all are twisted.
That's how come you're normal compared to.
What's that?
So that's how come you're normal, comparatively speaking, to all of your siblings, because you cut the ties, you broke that dysfunction.
Well, and
otherwise it's a hamster wheel.
As difficult as things were with me for those few years from like 11 to 15 with my dad, I know that he loved me. I know that he wanted the best for me. I know he didn't actually know how to give me that, but I think he tried the best that he could to his ability with the tools he had and without being willing to face his own demons. And I know he loved me, right? The good part of that is I had those years with him when I was young. And yeah, I have memories of them. It's very detailed snippets, but they're there from when I was 3, right? And I can picture them vividly in my head. The exact scenario, right? Like when I was 3, Dad got pulled over by a cop. And I was like 3.5, almost 4. And Dad was like, oh, that fucking asshole. Right? So the cop comes up to the car and asks for his license. And I'm standing, because it's the 1970s, right? I'm standing behind my dad's shoulder with his arm, like right here. I'm standing right next to him. And I look over him and I look outside and I go, Dad, he doesn't look like a fucking asshole to me. And my dad's like, oh, shit. And the cop just started laughing. And he was like, well, Mr. Bryant, you're really lucky I'm not an asshole, so you have a good day. Please drive slower. And he just gave him we left. My father told that story my whole life because he got off with, not getting in trouble. To him, it was the funniest thing ever, right? Mm-hmm. But he those times where he would, and he did it a lot when I was young, even when he was married to Goldie, he would take me to the park and we would just sit reading on a blanket together and we would talk. And when he was sober, he wasn't overtly racist. He wouldn't, in the book, Amy touches on that more than I'd like. I didn't actually realize he was racist, and by that covertly racist, until I was a young teen. Because he treated minorities pleasantly when we were out and about. But we did Rochester is a primarily 94% white community, right? And they didn't come over to our houses, but I didn't find that to be unusual because that didn't happen at other people's houses either. And he did not speak like a hick. My father he had fabulous penmanship. He sounded educated. And I think it's important to note that because this doesn't happen just in what you would consider a hick family. The reason my father got away with all of this, including beating the crap out of his wives for so long, was not just the time period, but because he came off as gentlemanly, intelligent, like somebody who wouldn't actually do that, right? It was very easy to hide the monster at home with this urbane, intelligent, calm, gentle man that he was when he was when he was sober.
Mm.
I very much grew up with a Jekyll and a Hyde, right?
Mm.
When he was sober, he was a great guy, but when he was drinking, man, that was it. Like all bets were off the table. Snap, instant arguments, fights, beatings, my way or the highway. And my dad honestly grew up abused as well. So I think he thought his abuse was going to teach me to be a better person. Only I don't think it works that way. Right? I don't think actually beating the shit out of your child and giving them black eyes and splitting open I'd like internal cuts on my mouth. And I don't believe putting a gun in your daughter's mouth and pulling the trigger, as a Russian roulette tool to teach her is the way to raise your kids. In fact, I raise my kids without any corporal punishment at all, and we have really good relationships, right? Some of it was the time frame, and some of it was just him. But I think in that time frame, in the 1980s, look, Lolita had come out. Kenny Rogers was huge. Kenny Rogers wrote a song called Scarlet Fever. If you listen to it, she's a stripper. And if you listen to it halfway through, you find out she's 16 years old, and this 40-year-old man is lusting after this 16-year-old girl. And it was perfectly, in fact, it was a #1 hit.
Mm.
Right? In the time frame that we grew up, the sexualization of girls was way more, I mean, it's still not fixed now, but it was worse then.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were lucky to be protected, I mean, the problem was, I wasn't protected because my father, because he was such a drunk, hung out with unsavory characters, bad people, right? And he would be the magnanimous guy trying to help them, right? Like he would invite them. There was always strange men at our house that he would invite over for dinner because they had nobody. And he would expect me to treat them graciously. And, I don't think he realized that he was inviting predators into his house. Either that or he saw his relationship with them and didn't think past that. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And so I wasn't protected. There were a lot of people in our generation who were fabulous for them. But because I wasn't, a lot of bad things happened to me, right? My dad, that night that he sent me out to pizza and a movie with that girl, thought he was doing good for me, right? When I came home at 5 a.m., apparently seemingly unharmed, because I chose not to fight the guy because, he made it very clear that if I did, the others would jump in and I wouldn't survive them all, right? So I didn't fight him. I disassociated instead. I was 12. When I came home, though, looking apparently okay, my dad didn't think beyond his own anger and his own rage that's not normal for me. I'd never done anything like that. Fuck, I hadn't left the house for like a year. He didn't look at how out of character anything was. He was so in his own rage that I had scared him and that he thought something bad could have happened to me, that he lashed out at me instead of saying, hey, what happened?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I was, first of all, I was 12. I was at the mercy of this other girl. We didn't know her. He thought, 16-year-old runaway, fine, she's perfectly safe to send my daughter out with. Apparently not. But he couldn't see beyond his own anger, right? And then when I realized that he couldn't see beyond himself was when the courts mandated when I was in foster care that he have regular counseling appointments with me, family counseling. And he refused to do it, but said, hey, I'll talk to her at a coffee shop or whatever once a week. And we were sitting there and I told him about the teenage boys. I did not tell him about that night because I think it was safer for me at the time emotionally, right? to bring up that one first. And when he looked at me and said, well, maybe next time you'll know better how to take care of yourself, I realized that he was patently unable to actually be a good parent.
Mm.
That though he had tried his best, I was not going to listen to him anymore. And so I ended up moving out on my own at 16. I had a full-time job. I was in school. I was a year ahead, started my senior year at 16. Sorry, my phone is making noises. It's a complicated life, and there's a lot Amy couldn't put into that story. But all along, Rita, I knew it wasn't normal. I knew that the life we lived was not my fault, and that I was and I think what made me, by the time I met Wally, I was homicidal and suicidal. I hated men, despised them, had utter contempt for men, all men. Wanted to hurt them, which is why several times when guys that pursued me and I found out they were married, why I, went to their wives. Because I was like, I didn't do it out of a altruistic sense of, well, the wives need to know he's cheating. It was, this motherfucker's sick. He's going after teenagers. He's married. His wife needs to know what a scumbag he is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I feel no guilt if their marriages broke up. None. Because frankly, they should. Right? This woman needs to know she's married to a pedophile.
Yeah.
And I think more people need to stand up like that. And I'm hoping this book reaches people that might be in similar situations, abusive situations, abused teenagers, even abused wives who need to get away from sick people and understand that, there's a lot of, in the abuse world, there's a lot of, I feel trapped. And at my age, I was kind of trapped because I was a minor. But what Wally helped me realize is it was a very short amount of time until I was on my own. And he would ask me questions. Like, I got in trouble one night. I went out partying, got in trouble. It was a bad situation. So we went to an AA meeting the next day, and I talked to him about it. And I said, he looked at me just kind of weird. And I said, what, you worried I wouldn't land on my feet? And he said, no, I'm not worried about whether or not you land on your feet. I never worry about that. I worry about which way you're going to run. I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, you keep letting them win. I said, huh? He goes, you claim you want your life to be better, but you have to take control for that to happen. And you keep giving them your control. You have to decide. Do you get to choose the direction of your life, or do you let them shut off your light? And he would ask me questions. That's how he got through to me, not through parenting me or telling me what to do or being any kind of authoritarian figure. He would ask me questions and he'd say, no, I don't want the answer. I want you to think about it.
Yeah.
Do you choose, or do you let them choose for you? If you do this, you're letting them choose for you. You can create your own life, and you can choose not to let them shut off your light. But that choice is up to you. It's up to each of us. It was about, you guys have all seen the fault versus responsibility thing with Will Smith? No? Fault versus responsibility?
Mm-mm.
So Will Smith did this brief 2-minute video, and basically this is kind of the premise of what Wally taught me all those years ago. Fault versus responsibility. If you were abused as a child, you're an abused wife, somebody wronged you, it is not your fault that happened, but it is damn sure your responsibility to fix it. They can't fix it for you. You have to decide how to fix it so that you can live your best life without letting them destroy it.
Hmm.
Right?
You need to be a motivational speaker. I can sit and listen to you all day long.
So I don't know if Amy told you guys, but I'm sick. I have cancer.
Oh.
Stage 4 colon cancer. I was diagnosed after Amy started writing. So now I'm in the biggest fight of my life, right? Despite all those fights that went on, now I'm fighting this. Like in the last, while we've been writing and reviewing this book, I've had like 2,000 hours of chemo, 2 big surgeries, 6 minor surgical procedures, radiation type stuff. And that fight is going to continue. Because at stage 4, it never really goes away. Even if they can get it to go away for a little while, it will come back. So now I'll be fighting this for the rest of my life. And it was really important to me before we started this book to get that message out. People had been telling me for decades, probably, when they'd ask about my life, and at work, it's so awkward when they ask about, so how many brothers and sisters do you have? Over 30. What? How'd that happen? Like, your dad get married a couple times? Yeah. How many? 10. What? Like, and so then that dug into more questions, which always made me hugely uncomfortable. But sometimes I would meet somebody not as awesome as Amy, but maybe half as awesome as Amy, who would actually ask me, more serious questions, and I would give them a snippet of some of the bad stuff, like one incident, and we would talk about that and say, yeah, look, I had a really tumultuous childhood. This is just like one incident. I really prefer not to talk about my childhood because of that. And not just in a professional world, but throughout my life. And everyone I talked to said, you got to write a book, you got to write a book, you got to write a book. And one of my psychiatrists told me, you should write about this. Like, you're an inspiration of somebody who's been through hell and come out of it. I've had and come out of it in a way that most people don't. I had a couple of psychiatrists, some of my psychiatrists tell me that, look, you're not normal. What do you mean I'm not normal? Because people who've lived through what you lived through don't have all the success that you've had. And by success, I mean, listen, Dave and I have been together almost 26 years now, right? We have 2 healthy, well-adjusted kids who are in college and happy to be there. I had a very successful career, so successful as a paralegal that companies from all over the country still call me wanting me to come work for them. New York, San Francisco, blah, blah, blah. I'm very highly skilled and well regarded in my industry. So I've managed professional relations, and all of my past bosses, every single one loves me to this day. So when they get called, they're like, oh yeah, you should hire her. Absolutely. Every single one, right? And I think because they find me refreshing. I bust my butt. I work hard. I, am a great team player. Ask Amy, right? I'll pitch in if somebody needs help. If they want to help me, I don't object. I'm like, yeah, I could use it. I don't have a lot of friends, but the few close friends I have mean the world to me, and I would do anything for them. I have fairly well, I still have triggers, and I still have PTSD, sorry. The triggers don't happen often now. They did early in my marriage. David and I had a couple of issues, a couple of times that had to be dealt with. But he didn't realize, and he's learned a lot over the years too.
Sorry about you being locked in a pantry closet.
That's the incident I'm thinking of. It's not the only one, but yeah, that's the incident I'm thinking of. He thought it would be funny to lock me in the pantry closet and turn out the light. That's a trigger for me, being locked in a small place in the dark, because Goldie used to put me in the closets and in the attic for hours on end. And being that I'm adult, I kicked the door open, messed up the frame, and he wanted me to apologize for it. I said, absolutely not. I will never apologize for it. Never. And he was like, you broke the door frame. I'm like, you triggered my PTSD. I'm not going to apologize for it. And it took him a long time to understand why. Now he gets it. he's had to learn a lot living with me about the twisted people in this world. I feel bad because I kind of have corrupted him in a way. He had such a beautiful innocence when I met him. And part of the reason Amy didn't dive deeper into our internet chats is because I didn't give her a lot to work with there. We talked for hours and hours and hours on the internet, but I can recall the topics of conversations, but I can't remember the details, guys. I'll have to think about that some more and see if there's a way we can fill that out, because I just remember it being a relief. I mean, I told him up front when we first started talking, I said, look, dude, I'm not looking for a relationship. I'm just getting out of a marriage. I need to heal. I don't want a boyfriend. I just need somebody to talk to. And he was like, that's great, because I'm not looking for a girlfriend. And I was like, great. And we talked about everything, religious, politics, music. And I can tell you that, but the deep down and dirty of it, I don't know how good it is to talk about which bands we like and which books we like and which, I'm not sure how helpful that is. But through those conversations, we learned that we had a lot in common. And he was easy to talk to. And so we kept talking. Most of it was not romantic at the time. And I want to meet you wasn't necessarily I want to have a relationship with you. It was like, you're a really cool person. And I'd like to see you in person. And he came up, I had moved to Seattle after my divorce with my ex-husband to stay with Kathy because she needed my help for a little while. And Dave agreed to come out here. He was like, listen, I have friends in the area. So if we don't keep getting along as friends, at least, then I'll just go hang out with my other friends. I was like, okay. Except that when he flew up here, I picked him up at the airport and we started talking. We hit it off so well. We spent the entire 10 days in each other's pockets. And by the time he left, we agreed that he'd move out here and we'd see where it goes. No, we were going to live together and just see where the relationship took us. No pressure if it did or didn't. Mm-hmm. And we were together 3 years before we got married. So it wasn't, I was scared actually after, I told him what I'd been through with Paul and how Paul lied to me. And I was like, I can't do that again. So I'm never getting into a deep relationship with another guy unless I know for sure that he's on the same page as me with that. Right. It was scary for me.
So Lynn, I know the answer of this, of course, but so, when Gisela left and took the girls with her, did you ever reconnect with them?
Yeah, the weirdest thing is last December, David and I went down to Vegas for a weekend to see a concert. And we were down there, we got down there like Thursday night, but Saturday, right before the concert, I got a phone call on my cell from a number I didn't recognize. Now, I don't normally answer calls I don't recognize, but I thought, what the hell, we're just relaxing in the hotel room. Maybe I'll play with some telemarketer. They bugged me. So I answered it, and she was like, this woman on the other end was like, hi, is this Connie Bryant? And I went, excuse me? Because that's my maiden name. And she said, please don't hang up. And I was like, okay. She said, my name is Sherry. And I think I'm your little sister.
Oh.
So she's Tina. She was the youngest girl of the two that Goldie had with my dad. So we talked for a while on the phone. She had called me hoping at minimum to get some medical info, family medical info, because of a child she has some medical issues, and she was wondering if it was hereditary, if she had to worry, Anyway, she said at best I was hoping for that. She said, Dad told me you all hated us and wanted nothing to do with us, and she left Dad when I was 2 weeks old. I was like, well, that's a lie. And so she and I got to talking, and I said, I'm going to have a hard time with this. And she said, why? And I said, well, because I despise your mother. And I don't know if we're going to have to make her off limits to talk about, right? Because I don't want to hurt you, but I hate that woman. And she's like, good, I hate her too. I haven't talked to her for 8 years. So apparently After Goldie left my dad, Sherry ended up becoming the scapegoat child.
Mm.
Oh,
She, like me, is a paralegal. She, like me, is married to a former military man. Anyway, we've been getting to know each other. I went out to visit her in Montana a couple
Good.
times,
Good.
and she came here with her whole family for Thanksgiving. So yeah, after 40 years, I reconnected with the girl sister I hadn't seen since she was 1.5.
Wow.
Mm.
It's been pretty cool, actually. Her daughters love me.
So Lynn is flying out here in April, and she's going to be at Deer Clan Books with me in Bethany, and that is April 14th.
Well, 14.
April 14th, which is a Friday. We're going to be at the the Bethany bookstore. But we've got food, we've got drinks, we've got Lynn and me talking more about the book. We've got 2 of the Asian women trailblazers who boss up women flying in from California to give us, a hurrah power talk. Very inspiring women. So anyways, with that, I just hope you guys come and support, strong women, storytelling, that kind of stuff. And then that's on a Friday, but Saturday, the next day, which is April 15th, Lynn and I will be at the Museum of Osteology in Oklahoma City. It's the Skeletons Museum of all the dinosaurs. And we're going to do a 2-hour thing there as well, where we're going to do book signing and do a reading, age-appropriate book reading. I was thinking maybe a scene from when you were, road tripping with Dad on the CB radio or something, because there'll be kids meandering.
Yeah.
And that reading will be via Facebook Live as well. So that's an opportunity also for you guys to come and support us, but also to meet Lynn and ask all your questions. So yeah, there's a lot going on, and we're going to see each other next week. I'm hoping that we can do a Facebook Live also together to promote the book as it's going to be coming out in a month and a half, right? Yeah. Yeah.
It's fast now. And ladies, if you have published books, I'd like you to each, if you come, will you please bring one of your published books? I'd like to buy it and get you to sign it for me and say personally thank you for. I know that Amy has also been reviewing your books, but as a personal, I want to say thank you to each of you for. I know this was not an easy story to read. I didn't even want to tell Amy about the first sexual assault because I wasn't able to deal with it.
That one just threw me out of the left field, and I was like, "What?"
I wasn't able to deal with it mentally for decades. I couldn't even face it. In fact, there's a scene in the book where I am back I'm in the tub. I remember you guys reviewing it, and Amy was talking about kind of my reaction of let me get clean. I need to be clean. I need to be clean. And I told her, I said, I need to change that. And she said, why? I said, because that's not what I was thinking. She's like, what were you thinking? And I was thinking, get him off me, get him off me. I can't stand the smell, the scent, the feel, like get him off me. Like that's what I was thinking. And I think that's more impactful anyway than the way that she wrote it. Because maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I felt.
Yeah.
Get this.
I heard back from, so we have several beta readers and 2 editors for this book, and I reached out to them yesterday to do a pulse check, a mental health check, and I said, hey, just want to take a quick check on how you guys are doing as you're reading this book. A couple of them were like, I have to read it in spurts. One of them said, I'm really having a struggle here reading this book. And she said, it's not just hard to get through, but to know that this actually happened to someone, right? That it's a true story.
But that's the point, Amy. I survived it, and I've had a good, healthy life because I did not let those things destroy me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because Wally encouraged me to work through my issues and not to let them distinguish my light. That's the early part of the story is hard to get through, but I think it's important for readers to see that look, you can go through absolute hell and still get out of it and have a good life, but you've got to face those demons and not let them win. That's what they need. They need to bring somebody down. They need to feel power over people. You know, I don't know what makes a pedophile feel power over a child, because they're so physically stronger anyway. But we can't let these people, whether they're not family, destroy. You can't let somebody destroy you. You get to decide, right? That's the message. You get to decide to have a good life, but you have to have the courage to work through it and reach for it.
Yeah.
Everybody needs a Wally, someone who cares.
Yeah, and the power of one person.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other thing. One person's all it takes to reach out to this troubled teen or this troubled child, right? So often people don't want to get involved because they know that's a mess, right? But Wally literally saved my life, guys. Like, literally saved my life. He also saved me from hating men,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Becoming this man-hating bitch, which I would have become, totally. And if I hadn't gotten through that and realized that there were good men, I wouldn't have the marriage I do now.
Yeah.
Right? And healthy. The beautiful thing is I've got 2 young adult sons who respect women.
Awesome.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. I taught them to be the opposite of the shit that I grew up with. Like,
And you need to go and get your afterword when we're done with the call.
yeah. Maybe I'll have to put that in the afterward.
Yeah.
I think I'm proud of that more than anything else. Raising the boys to be, you know, I mean, my oldest, who is getting his, you know, degree in psychology now, he wants to work with abused women and sex trafficked teens.
Good for him.
That's
Yes.
a difficult thing, but he's like, I think I can make the most impact. He wants to be other people's Wally from a therapist perspective.
Mm.
Good.
Good for
He
him.
can't wait for the book to come out. He wants to read it. Like, the instant it comes out, he's begging me for the timeline of when it comes out. And I mean,
How
he
do
and I
you
have
feel about
conversations. He uses me as a subject in some of his papers, but he talks to me about it beforehand and asks me if it's okay and tells me all about the paper, what it's on, why he wants to use me as a subject on, and he tends to use me as a subject on papers for, you know, resiliency and right, like, and how you can not let these things destroy you, right? He's had a couple of classes where he's like, Mom, he loves psychology. He loves the degree he's getting. He's really happy to dive into the work. And he told me, you know, some parents wouldn't talk to their kids about their own stuff, and they don't know it all. My youngest knows way less than my oldest because my youngest doesn't want to know, and I respect that. It's fine. My oldest, though, does. And so I've been pretty frankly honest with him about the family abuse and that kind of stuff. He does know that there were rapes. And he says that I have taught him more about psychology than several of his professors. So just the psychology of, like, he took a family abuse class. And I think he was able to help the class as much as he got out of it because of the conversations he and I have had, right? Like, growing up, and that we have, he calls me not often, every couple of weeks, but we'll talk for 3 hours and we dive into psychology in every call. Particularly because that's what he's going to school for, right? And it's wonderful. It's wonderful to have raised a compassionate young man who, when a girl was raped on campus, who was a friend of his, or sexually assaulted on campus, that he's the one who helped her and, like, got her what she needed and stood by her side to help her get through it, right? They're going to be good men, and I'm proud of that.
Well, we have 5 minutes left, ladies. Is there anything else you want to do or say?
I do have one comment. for those texts, you mentioned, Lynn, that you, in talking in all those conversations, you found each other cool and what that brought you together. I would love to read, I guess because we read so much of the trauma, I would love to see in those texts what he saw in you that was super cool, that he wanted to come meet you. I think that as a reader, we'd love to see from someone who didn't know your history, just to know you, and in talking to you, what he saw that was so cool. Because I think would be so interesting for the reader to see that you're more than just the trauma that happened to you. You are more than that, and I don't know that he knew all that when you guys were just.
He didn't know any of it when in fact,
So,
I ended up having to tell him of my childhood over years, because I'd tell him about one incident and he'd get so mad he couldn't handle it. In fact, when we had been together, I think a year at one point, we were living in our very first apartment together, and my father kept trying to call and I wasn't answering his calls, right? And David looked at me and he said, you're not a very good daughter. Oh, ladies. I lost some shit. I turned around and I looked at him and I said, you have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. My father's lucky I even talked to him at all.
mm-hmm.
And so that was the first time I started to address my childhood stuff with David. And it took a long time for him to really get the whole story and to be able to deal with it, because he would get so mad at some of these things. He wanted to kill somebody and he couldn't handle that intense of emotion, and so he would go, okay, that's enough. I can't take anymore right now. I want to kill something.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say, ladies, I was diagnosed with cancer. It was very scary, stage 4, big tumors, terrifying. But that man has been by my step every step of the way. He goes to all my chemo treatments with me. He goes to every appointment with me. I suggest going to appointments by myself. He's like, nope, got to be there, right? He takes
Well, now
care.
you're moving to Kansas.
Now we're moving.
Yeah.
Now we're moving. It's funny because I'm going to Santa Fe meet with Amy next week, and we're going to have a 4-day weekend there. And then I come back here for 2 days, and then we're moving to Kansas. So my life's a little, and I had a full hysterectomy surgery last week. So my life's a bit busy right now. But I mean, even through all that I'm going through, my husband's been my rock, my absolute rock.
And vice versa. I know that you're a rock for David, so.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes, that's true.
Yeah.
But we have a great relationship. We're not just married couple. We're really deep friends. I think that's necessary.
Yes. We'll chat offline to see what's so cool about Lynn that David was. What's so cool
Well, I'll
about
have to
Claire
talk
that
to him
Greg
about
really
what
liked.
attracted him to me.
Yeah,
Love to see that.
Yeah,
like that.
kind of see how we can write that in.
Yep.
Okay, I'll give that some thought over this weekend.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you all, ladies, for going through all of this whole journey.
Thanks for sharing your story. And
I just wanted to help people.
It's important.
It took me a long time to have the courage to go, do I really want?
has anybody reached out to you and said,
about you?
well, since we've done the author reveal, has anybody reached out to you and said, oh my gosh, this book's about you, Lynn?
Steve Whitman wants to talk about
Really? Okay.
it. I don't know how I feel about that, Amy.
Let's talk about that later.
He's like, yeah, I need to get this book as soon as possible. I'm like, I don't know if you want to read it, Steve.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will give you 1 minute back. Until next time.
Yeah.
Everyone.
Later.
Thank you, Lynn.
You're
Bye-bye.
welcome. Thank you, ladies.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.